There are places that exist only when you are not supposed to be there. Places that look ordinary in daylight, but change the moment the sun disappears. This story is not about what hides in the dark, but about what waits for you to cross the line between light and night. In northern Thailand, there is a forest no map will admit exists. And after sunset, it does not belong to the living. This is the story of the forbidden forest after sunset. Chapter 1. The forest that does not exist on any map. There is a forest in northern Thailand that you will never find on a map. It does not appear in tourist brochures. It is not marked on government land records. Satellite images show only an empty blur of green where it should be. And yet, everyone in the nearby villages knows exactly where it is. They call it the Forbidden Forest. During the day, it looks ordinary. Tall teak trees, tangled vines, damp soil that smells of rot and rain. Sunlight filters through the leaves in broken pieces. And birds cry from somewhere deep inside. Hunters pass near it. Farmers cut wood along its edge. Children are warned not to wander too close. But nothing about the forest seems unusual at first glance. That illusion lasts only until sunset. In this village, people do not say, nightfall. They say, when the forest changes hands. After the sun sinks behind the mountains, no one enters the forest. Not the drunk, not the desperate, not even the police. If a cow runs inside at dusk, it is abandoned. If a dog chases something past the tree line, its owner does not follow. Because the rule is simple and absolute. No one who enters the forest after sunset returns the same. Some never return at all. Over the last decade, 15 people have disappeared without a trace. Not tourists, not outsiders, locals, people who knew every path, every stream, every lie the forest could tell. They vanished quietly. No screams. No blood. No footprints leading back out. When search parties entered the forest at dawn, they found nothing. No disturbed soil. No broken branches. No signs of struggle. It was as if the missing had simply stepped out of the world. And the forest, in daylight, looked innocent again. I first heard about the Forbidden Forest from a friend who worked as a local police officer. He did not speak easily about it. When he finally did, he lowered his voice, even though we were alone. The strange thing, he said, is that the forest doesn't take people by force. He told me that every missing person had made a choice, small, careless, ordinary. One stayed too long while collecting mushrooms. One followed a sound he thought was a crying child. One believed he was already close to the road home. They all crossed the tree line after the sun was gone. The villagers say the forest has no anger, no hunger, only patience. It waits for the moment when light gives up the land. When that happens, the paths rearrange themselves. The air grows heavy, as if breathing becomes a shared effort. Sounds flatten, losing their distance, and the forest begins to remember things that are not supposed to exist anymore. That is why elders warn children. If you hear your name called from the trees after sunset, do not answer. If you see a familiar face inside the forest at night, do not follow. And if you ever find yourself inside when the sky turns dark, do not trust the way out. Because after sunset, the forest no longer belongs to the living. And once it notices you, it will make sure you never forget it. Chapter 2. The old monk who refused to look at the forest. At the very edge of the village, where the dirt road narrows and the trees begin to crowd together, there is a small temple. It is old, quiet, and almost forgotten, much like the forest it faces. The monk who lives there has been there longer than anyone can remember. No one knows his exact age. Some say he arrived when the village was still only a handful of houses. Others believe he was already old when the first disappearances happened. His head is shaved clean. His robes faded by years of rain and smoke. And his eyes, clouded and pale, rarely focus on any one thing for long. What everyone agrees on is this: the monk never looks at the forest after sunset. When I went to see him, the sun was already sinking. Orange light spilled across the temple floor, stopping just short of the tree line. The forest beyond stood dark and still, like it was listening. The monk noticed my gaze and gently turned my head away. "Do not give it attention," he said calmly. "Attention is how it learns you." I asked him what the forest really was. He did not answer right away. Instead, he lit incense and waited for the smoke to rise, curling slowly toward the ceiling. Only when the chanting from the evening prayer ended did he speak. "This forest," he said, "is not cursed." That surprised me. He explained that curses fade. They weaken. They unravel when those who cast them die. But the forbidden forest had only grown stronger over time. "Something lives there," the monk continued, "not in flesh, not in spirit alone, something fed by memory, fear, and unfinished death." Long before the village existed, the forest was used as a place of punishment. Criminals, traitors, and those accused of practicing forbidden rituals were taken inside. Some were executed, others were bound to trees and left to die slowly. No burial, no rites, no prayers to guide them onward. Their suffering soaked into the land. The monk said the ground remembers, trees remember, and when too much pain is left unacknowledged, it gathers itself into something that wants to be noticed. The villagers once tried to destroy the forest. Fire was brought in, the flames burned for 3 days. Smoke covered the valley. On the 4th morning, the fire was gone. Not a single tree had fallen. Another time, metal fences were erected. They collapsed overnight, nails bent inward, as if pressed by hands from the other side. The monk lowered his voice. "It does not want to leave," he said, "and it does not want to be alone." I asked him why the forest only became dangerous after sunset. He looked at me for a long time before answering. "Because daylight belongs to humans," he said, "but dusk belongs to things that are unsure whether they are dead." As the last light disappeared, the monk closed the temple doors. Behind us, the forest remained unseen, unlooked at, waiting.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 3. The Man Who Entered at Dusk. Somchai had lived beside the forest his entire life. He knew the sound of its insects, the way the ground softened after rain, the narrow paths hunters used that never appeared on maps. He was not reckless, and he was not ignorant. He simply believed that fear was something invented by people who did not know the land well enough. On the evening he disappeared, Somchai was tracking a wounded deer. The animal had been hit earlier in the day, and blood dotted the undergrowth in small, dark stains. Somchai followed slowly, careful not to lose the trail. He noticed the light thinning, the shadows stretching longer between the trees. But he told himself he still had time. The edge of the forest was close. He was certain of it. When the sun finally slipped behind the mountains, Somchai stopped walking. The air changed instantly. The warmth drained from the ground, replaced by a damp chill that crawled up his legs. The forest, which had been alive with sound only moments before, fell silent. No insects, no birds, not even the wind. Somchai turned to head back. The path behind him was gone. Not blocked, not hidden. Simply not there. Trees stood where the trail should have been, thick, ancient trunks that looked as though they had always been there. Confused but calm, Somchai moved forward, certain that another familiar route would appear. That was when he heard his name. It was spoken softly, lovingly. "Somchai." The voice came from deeper in the forest. It belonged to his mother. She had died more than 10 years earlier. Her body cremated, her ashes scattered according to tradition, and yet the voice was unmistakable. The same gentle tone she used when calling him home for dinner. The same warmth. Somchai froze. Every lesson he had learned told him to turn away. But grief is louder than reason. He took a step toward the sound, then another. With each step, the forest seemed to close in. The trees leaned closer. The darkness thickened, as though the night had weight. Still, the voice guided him forward, always just out of sight. "Come," it said, "you're lost." Hours passed, or minutes. Time no longer made sense. When villagers searched the forest at dawn, they found Somchai's rifle near the boundary. The barrel was bent, the wooden stock was scarred deeply, gouged by marks that did not resemble animal claws. They led away from the gun. Not footprints. Handprints. Dragged. And then, nothing. The forest offered no further signs. By daylight, it stood quietly, unchanged, innocent. But those who found the rifle said one thing disturbed them more than anything else. The safety was still on. Somchai had never fired a single shot. Chapter 4. Sunset is a door. In the village, sunset is not treated as a time of day. It is treated as a boundary. People finish their work early. Doors are shut before the sky fully darkens. Children are called inside while there is still light in their eyes. No one lingers near the forest once the sun begins to sink. Because everyone understands the same unspoken rule. Sunset is when the forest opens. The elders say it is not a metaphor. It is not superstition meant to scare children. Sunset is a real change, one that can be felt in the body before it is seen. As the light fades, the air near the forest thickens. Breathing becomes heavier, as if the lungs must work harder to draw air in. Sounds lose their distance. A footstep 100 meters away feels close. A whisper nearby seems impossibly far. Paths shift. Trails that were walked for generations no longer lead where they should. A turn to the left becomes a circle. A straight line bends without the walker noticing. The forest does not trap people by force. It rearranges itself quietly, allowing confusion to do the rest. Those who have entered at dusk describe the same sensation. A moment when the world feels slightly wrong, like a familiar room where the furniture has been moved just enough to unsettle the mind. The villagers believe this happens because sunset is not fully day, and not yet night. It belongs to neither side. The monk once explained it this way: during daylight, the forest must obey the rules of the living world. At night, it belongs fully to what remains unseen. But at dusk, when the sun has not completely surrendered, the two worlds overlap. That overlap creates an opening. People who step into the forest after sunset are not crossing into a place. They are crossing into a condition. Inside that condition, memories lose their weight, directions lose meaning. The forest does not appear hostile, it appears helpful. Familiar landmarks show themselves. Warm lights flicker between trees. The sound of voices drifts gently through the dark, offering guidance. The danger is not fear. The danger is comfort. Those who disappear are rarely panicked. They are often calm. Later, when fragments of their stories surface through dreams or broken recordings, one detail always returns. They believed they were close to leaving. Sunset does not kill. It invites. Once the door closes fully, once night claims the forest, the way back no longer exists in the same form. The exit a person remembers belongs to daylight, and daylight no longer recognizes them. That is why search parties only enter at dawn. By morning, the door has shut again. The forest pretends nothing happened. Paths return. Sounds behave normally. The air feels light. But whatever crossed the threshold after sunset remains on the other side. Not lost. Claimed.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 5. The Girl Who Came Back Wrong. Molly disappeared on a night when the rain would not stop. She was 19, quiet, and known in the village for never breaking rules. When the storm began, her parents assumed she had taken shelter at a friend's house. By the time they realized she had not returned, darkness had already settled, thick and complete. No one went into the forest to search for her. At dawn, villagers followed her footprints to the edge of the trees. The marks stopped abruptly, as if she had stepped off the ground and vanished into the air. There were no signs of struggle, no broken branches, no trail leading deeper inside. After 3 days, the monk performed funeral rites. Molly's name was spoken as one of the dead. A month later, she came home. It was past midnight when her parents heard knocking at the door. Not frantic, not desperate, slow, polite, as though the person on the other side knew they would be let in. When they opened the door, Molly stood there barefoot, her clothes damp with mud. Her hair clung to her face, but her skin was strangely pale, almost gray. She did not ask to come inside. She simply looked at them and smiled. The smile did not reach her eyes. She said nothing. When her mother reached for her, Molly stepped back. Her gaze drifted past them, into the house, lingering on dark corners and doorways, as if she were counting something unseen. Her father noticed something else. She was not breathing. Not shallow. Not slow. Not at all. Still, she remained standing. After several minutes, Molly turned and walked away, back toward the forest. Her parents were too afraid to follow. They watched her disappear into the darkness, the same calm smile fixed on her face. In the morning, Molly was gone again. Inside the house, muddy footprints covered the floor. They circled the bed where her parents slept, over and over, never stepping onto the mattress itself, as if something had stood there all night, watching. The monk returned and burned incense until the smoke thickened the air. She came back, he said, because the forest let her go. When asked why, the monk shook his head. Sometimes, he whispered, it sends something back so we will remember. After that night, people avoided speaking Molly's name. Children were warned not to smile at strangers in the dark, and if someone heard knocking after midnight, they were told to stay silent. Because the forest does not always keep what it takes. Sometimes, it returns it. Change just enough to make you wish it hadn't. Chapter 6. The drumming beneath the soil. The sound began during the season when the moon disappeared. On those nights, the sky above the village was dark and flat, like a lid pressed tightly over the world. No stars, no glow, just heat, silence, and the heavy presence of the forest looming at the edge of sight. It was then that people first heard the drumming. Not loud, not sudden. Slow, deep, rhythmic. At first, villagers thought it was thunder rolling somewhere beyond the mountains. But there were no clouds, no rain, and the sound did not come from above. It came from below. Those living closest to the forest said they could feel it before they heard it. A faint vibration beneath their feet, like the earth shifting its weight. Bowls on wooden shelves rattled softly. Dogs whimpered and hid under houses, refusing to come out even when called. The drumming followed a steady pattern. Thump. Pause. Thump. Pause. Too deliberate to be natural. The monk said it was not a warning. It is counting, he explained, like a heartbeat. When asked what the forest was counting, he refused to answer. As nights passed, the drumming grew clearer. Those who listened too closely reported a strange sensation, a pressure in the chest, as if their own hearts were trying to match the rhythm beneath the soil. Some woke from sleep gasping for air, their dreams filled with images of roots tightening around bones. One man, a farmer whose house stood closest to the tree line, said he heard whispers layered beneath the drumming. Not words at first, just breath, many breaths, too many to belong to the living. On the seventh night, the sound stopped abruptly. The silence was worse. That same morning, a young boy went missing. Searchers found his footprints leading toward the forest, stopping just short of the trees. Beside them were deeper impressions in the dirt, wide, uneven marks, as if something heavy had stood there waiting. When the drumming returned the following night, it had changed. There were two rhythms now. One deep and slow, the other faint and uneven, like a second heartbeat struggling to keep time. The monk closed the temple doors and instructed everyone to stay inside after sunset. He burned incense until the air grew thick and bitter, chanting prayers meant for restless spirits. But he admitted something that night, his voice barely louder than the drums themselves. The forest is not calling the dead, he said, it is teaching them to answer. From that night on, no one doubted that the forest was alive. Not as a place, but as something buried, breathing, and slowly waking beneath the roots.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 7. The child who saw what others couldn't. The boy had no family left. His parents had died years earlier, and he lived with distant relatives in a house closest to the forest. Because no one paid him much attention, people later said that was why he noticed things others did not. He was the first to speak of the figures. At night, when the drumming echoed beneath the soil, the boy would sit awake, staring toward the trees. One evening, he told his aunt that there were people standing in the forest. Not walking, not moving, just standing. When asked who they were, the boy shook his head. They don't have faces, he said, they're empty where faces should be. The villagers laughed it off at first, assuming fear had given shape to his imagination. But the boy insisted. He said the figures appeared only after sunset, only when the forest fell completely silent. They are darker than the night, he explained, like holes where light should be. He said the figures did not step forward. They slid, barely touching the ground, as if their legs were forgotten parts of them. And no matter where he looked, they were always watching him. One night, the boy pointed toward the tree line and began to cry. "They're waiting," he said. "They think I belong there." The monk was called to speak with him. After listening quietly, the monk asked the boy one question. "Do they blink?" The boy shook his head. "Then they are not spirits," the monk said. He explained later, to those who dared listen, that spirits remember being human. They mimic life. They blink. They breathe. What the boy saw were impressions, shadows left behind by people who had stayed too long. Not alive. Not dead. Something in between, held together by the forest's attention. After that night, the boy refused to sleep. He said the figures leaned closer each evening, stretching their dark shapes through the trees. Sometimes, they whispered, not words, just the sound of breath and patience. One morning, the boy was gone. There were no footprints this time. Only a single mark pressed into the dirt outside his window, long and shallow, as if something had waited there all night before being allowed to take him. The forest was silent for weeks afterward, as if it had finally received what it had been watching. Chapter 8. The forest does not kill quickly. The villagers eventually understood one thing about the forbidden forest. It does not kill. At least, not in the way people expect. There were no torn bodies found at the forest's edge, no bones unearthed by animals, no bloodstains soaking into the soil. Death, if it happened at all, happened slowly and quietly, far from the understanding of the living. Those who entered the forest after sunset were not attacked. They were received. Survivors, few and unreliable as they were, described the same beginning. The forest felt familiar. Paths appeared where none should exist. Lights flickered between trees like distant lanterns. The air smelled warm, almost comforting, carrying traces of incense, cooking smoke, or rain-soaked earth from childhood memories. One woman said she heard her grandmother humming an old lullaby, guiding her forward. Another believed he saw the glow of a roadside shop, certain that help was only steps away. The forest offered exactly what each person needed to keep walking. And as they walked, something began to loosen. Names slipped first, then faces, then the urgency to return home. Time became difficult to measure. Hunger faded, fear dulled into calm acceptance. Some described it as being gently unwrapped from themselves. The monk said the forest feeds on unfinished selves. People who still carry regret, longing, guilt, promises left unkept. The forest does not force them to stay, it convinces them there is no reason to leave. Those who disappear are not screaming. They are listening. One man who was found days later at the forest's edge could not remember his own age. He spoke in fragments, referring to himself in the third person, as though he were describing someone already gone. When asked why he entered the forest, he smiled faintly. "It felt like someone was waiting for me," he said. After that, he refused to speak again. The elders warn that the forest's greatest danger is not fear or pain. It is relief. Relief from choosing, from remembering, from being someone in a world that demands too much. By the time the forest is finished, there is nothing left to resist. That is why those who return, if they return at all, come back wrong. Not broken. Empty.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 9. The Ritual That Failed. When fear finally outweighed denial, the villagers decided to act. They did not go to the authorities. They did not seek help from outside. The forest had existed long before the village, and the villagers believed it required older solutions. A ritual was arranged. A spirit medium from the south was brought in, along with 2 monks trained in protective chants. Talismans were prepared using palm leaves, ash from cremation fires, and threads soaked in sacred oil. Each charm was marked with symbols meant to bind restless entities and sever attachments to the living world. For 3 days, the forest's edge became a place of prayer. Chanting echoed through the trees from sunrise to dusk, the air filled with incense smoke so thick it burned the eyes. Offerings of rice, fruit, and water were placed at the boundary, meant to appease whatever watched from within. On the 3rd night, the ritual reached its final stage. Just before sunset, the monks buried the last talisman at the forest's edge, sealing the boundary. As the sun disappeared, the chanting intensified. Drums were beaten in a counter rhythm, meant to disrupt the forest's pulse beneath the soil. For the first time in years, the forest felt completely silent. No wind, no insects, no drumming. People dared to hope. At dawn, they returned. Every talisman had been unearthed. They were not scattered, they were not broken. They had been carefully arranged on the ground, forming the outline of a human body lying on its back. There was no head. The monks refused to speak. The spirit medium left before noon, pale and shaking, abandoning his payment. Later, the elder monk admitted what they had all begun to suspect. The forest is not something we can seal, he said, it is something that remembers being sealed before. From that day on, no more rituals were attempted. The villagers understood then that the forest did not resist. It corrected. And whatever had been bound there long ago was no longer content to remain unnoticed. Chapter 10. The Last Man Who Lived Inside the Forest. There was one man the forest did not take. His name was Persit. He lived in a shack deep inside the forbidden forest, far beyond where any sane person would choose to remain. The villagers spoke of him in lowered voices, unsure whether he should be counted among the living or the dead. Persit had entered the forest many years ago. After sunset, during the season of mourning, his wife and child had died within the same week, taken by illness that left him hollow and unmoving. When he walked into the trees, people assumed he was choosing death. But he did not disappear. Days passed, then weeks, and one morning, a hunter spotted smoke rising from within the forest. Someone was cooking. Persit emerged occasionally at dawn to trade for rice and salt. He never stayed long. His eyes were clear but distant, as if he were always listening to something behind the speaker's words. He refused to answer most questions, but one thing was certain. The forest allowed him to stay. When asked why he had not been taken, Persit gave a simple answer. There was nothing left for it to use, he said. He explained that the forest fed on attachment, on memories people clung to, on fear of death, on the ache to return to what was lost. Persit had already buried everything he loved. When he entered the forest, he carried no longing, no hope, no resistance. I was already gone, he said calmly. It had no reason to keep me. At night, Persit claimed the forest changed around him. The trees leaned inward, listening. Shadows gathered near his shack, stopping just beyond the firelight. He could hear movement, slow, dragging, patient, but nothing ever crossed the circle of ash he kept around his home. Once, he admitted, the forest tried to speak to him. Not in voices. In images. He saw faces in the bark of trees, half-formed and watching. He saw paths opening that led nowhere. He felt the pull of familiarity, the suggestion that he could belong again if he wished. He refused. I stay because I do not want to be found, he said. Before disappearing back into the trees for the last time, Persit offered a warning to the villagers. The forest does not spare people, he said. It delays them. A year later, his shack was found empty. No signs of struggle, no remains, only the ash circle, undisturbed. And for the first time since anyone could remember, the forest felt fuller.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 11. Lost Inside Time. The forest does not only take people. It takes time. This was something the villagers did not fully understand until the night a group of students entered the forbidden forest with cameras and bright lights, laughing as though nothing in the world could touch them. They planned to film a short documentary. Just a few hours, they said, just enough to prove that the stories were exaggerated. They entered as the sun began to set, confident that they would be back before true darkness arrived. They were gone for 3 days. Search teams waited until dawn before entering. When they finally found the students, they were sitting in a small clearing near the forest's edge, calm and confused, their equipment scattered around them. None of them appeared injured. None of them believed they had been missing. We were only there for a while, one of them said. The light kept changing. The footage recovered from their cameras told a different story. The students were shown walking in circles around the same tree. Again and again, the angle shifted, but the landmark never changed. Over hours of recording, the light faded from evening to night, then to early morning, then back to dusk, without any visible break. Time folded in on itself. Worse still, the students' behavior changed as the footage continued. Their conversations grew disjointed. They began repeating the same questions. At one point, one of them stopped and asked, "Have we already been here?" No one answered. They were released after questioning, but none of them returned to their studies. One refused to leave his room after sunset. Another claimed he could still hear the forest breathing in his dreams. The monk explained what had happened. The forest does not move forward, he said, it moves inward. Inside, moments lose their order. Memory becomes circular. People are not held in place, they are worn down. Slowly, by repetition. That is why those trapped too long lose their sense of self. Without time, identity unravels. One of the students eventually returned to the village. He stood at the forest's edge, staring inside. "I think," he said softly, "part of me never came out." Chapter 12. When the forest learned to speak. At first, the villagers thought it was imagination. A trick of the wind. Leaves rubbing together. The way sound bends at night when fear sharpens the ears. But soon, too many people heard it for it to be dismissed. The forest had begun to speak. Not loudly, not clearly, and never in a single voice. It started as whispers that did not seem to come from any one direction. People standing near the forest at dusk would pause, certain they had heard something meant for them alone. A breath close to the ear. A murmur just behind the shoulder. When they turned, nothing was there. The monk said this was a bad sign. Before, he explained, the forest showed itself through what people wanted to see. Now it is trying something else. It was learning. Those who heard the whispers described the same sensation, a sudden familiarity. As if the sound belonged to someone they once trusted. The words were never urgent, never threatening. They were invitations. Stay a little longer. You're already tired. There's no need to hurry. Sometimes, it used names. A woman drawing water at dusk dropped her bucket when she heard her dead husband call her softly from the trees. A child heard his own voice whispering back at him, repeating thoughts he had never spoken aloud. What frightened the villagers most was not what the forest said, but how well it said it. The whispers carried memory. They used the exact tone a loved one once used. They paused in familiar places, mimicking old habits of speech. Whatever spoke from the forest was no longer guessing. It was remembering. The monk gathered the villagers and warned them to avoid the forest entirely. Even during daylight, he burned protective charms and tied white thread around wrists and doorways. But his voice lacked conviction. The forest is no longer waiting, he said, it is reaching. That night, the whispers grew louder. Not enough to be called voices, but enough to be understood. Those closest to the forest reported hearing the same word, repeated over and over, layered in dozens of overlapping tones, men, women, children, all speaking as one. Stay. Some covered their ears, some prayed, some wept. One man stepped outside his house and walked toward the trees without speaking. His family watched from the doorway, frozen, as he disappeared into the dark. In the morning, the forest was silent again. But it no longer felt empty. It felt aware.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 13. The night I entered the forest. I told myself I was only going to stand at the edge. That was the lie I used to make the decision feel smaller. The sun was already sinking when I reached the tree line. The sky burned orange and red behind the mountains. But inside the forest, the light was thin and gray, as though dusk had arrived there earlier than it should have. I could still turn back. That thought repeated in my mind, steady and reasonable. I had not crossed any line yet. I was still in the world where things behaved normally. Then I heard my name. Not shouted. Not whispered. Spoken the way someone says your name when they are certain you will answer. I froze. The sound did not come from deep within the forest. It came from just beyond the first row of trees. Close enough that I felt foolish pretending not to hear it. The voice carried no urgency, no threat, only familiarity. I took one step forward. The moment my foot crossed into the shade of the trees, the temperature dropped. It was subtle but immediate, like walking into water. The air felt thicker, heavier against my skin. Behind me, the sounds of the village faded too quickly. I turned to look back. The road was still there, but it looked wrong. Flatter, duller, as if it were something I was remembering rather than seeing. When I blinked, the colors dimmed further. I told myself not to panic. The forest did not rush me. It never does. The path ahead seemed clear enough, gently curving between the trees. The ground was soft, but not uneven, easy to walk. That was what frightened me most. I heard movement, slow, deliberate, not footsteps, more like something adjusting its weight. When I stopped walking, the sound stopped too. Then the voices returned. Not one voice. Many. They did not speak at the same time. They took turns, overlapping just enough that I could never focus on a single speaker. Each voice used a different tone, a different memory. A friend's laugh. A teacher's calm reassurance. My mother, calling me inside before it got dark. None of them asked me to come closer. They spoke as if I already had. I checked my watch. The hands were not moving. For the first time, fear cut through the calm. Sharp and sudden, I realized I could no longer tell how far I had walked, or how long I had been inside. The forest did not close around me. It waited, as if giving me time to decide whether I was ready to stop being someone who needed to leave. Chapter 14. Inside the Forbidden Forest. There was no moment when I realized I was lost. That was the most terrifying part. I kept walking, certain that if I followed the curve of the path, something familiar would appear, a clearing, a road, a break in the trees. The forest did not resist me. It did not block my way. It simply offered more of itself. The trees were all the same. Not similar, identical. Same height, same spacing, same scars in the bark, as if copied from a single memory and repeated endlessly. I began to feel as though I was walking through a thought rather than a place. There was no sky. When I looked up, branches tangled so tightly that darkness filled every gap. I could not tell whether it was night or only the forest pretending it was. The ground beneath my feet felt wrong, too soft. Each step sank slightly, as if the soil were breathing in response to my weight. I stopped walking. The ground stopped moving. That was when I noticed the figures. They stood between the trees, far enough away that I could almost pretend they were shadows. Almost. They were shaped like people, but unfinished, their outlines blurred at the edges, as if they had not decided what they were supposed to be. They did not approach. They watched. I tried to count them and failed. Every time I focused on one, another seemed to appear just outside my vision. When I turned my head quickly, I caught brief impressions, arms hanging too low, heads tilted at impossible angles, bodies stretched thin by something unseen. None of them had faces. I realized then that the forest was not empty. It was full. A pressure built in my chest, heavy and intimate, like grief remembered by the body before the mind understands it. The voices returned, but they no longer sounded separate. They blended. A chorus without words. I felt something tug at my thoughts. Not violently, but persistently, like fingers gently loosening a knot. Memories surfaced without warning. Moments I had forgotten. Moments I had never forgiven myself for. Each one came with the same quiet suggestion. You can rest here. I understood then what the monk meant. The forest did not want me dead. It wanted me unfinished. Something brushed past my leg. I looked down and saw nothing. But the sensation lingered, cold and deliberate. One of the figures had shifted closer. I took a step back. The ground yielded, then pulled. I don't remember deciding to run. I only remember the sudden certainty that if I stopped moving, I would never start again.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 15. After sunset. They told me I had been missing for 2 days. I did not believe them at first. To me, it felt shorter, like waking from a dream that refused to stay whole. My body was exhausted, my throat dry, my clothes streaked with mud I did not remember falling into. I was found just beyond the tree line at dawn, lying on my side as if I had simply stopped walking and fallen asleep. There were no injuries. That disturbed the villagers more than if there had been. The monk would not meet my eyes. He wrapped white thread around my wrist and whispered prayers under his breath, his hands trembling slightly as he worked. You were allowed back, he said finally. That does not mean you were untouched. I tried to remember how I left the forest. I could not. The last clear memory I had was running, branches tearing at my clothes. The ground shifting beneath my feet. The feeling that something was moving with me. Not behind me but inside my steps. After that, there was only a sensation of release. Like being set down gently by something that had decided not to keep me. Life resumed, but incorrectly. At sunset, I began to notice things. The light lingered too long in certain places. Shadows leaned where they should not. When the village grew quiet, I could hear a rhythm beneath it all, a faint, familiar pulse, like a heartbeat carried through soil and bone. Sometimes, when I closed my eyes, I saw the figures again. Standing, waiting. They were closer now. Not in distance but in clarity. I started avoiding mirrors at night. More than once, I caught my reflection lagging behind my movement. My face holding an expression I did not recognize. Calm, patient, almost relieved. The monk warned me not to return to the forest. But I know, he said carefully, that it will call you again. He was right. At dusk, when the world balances between light and dark, I hear it, not loudly, not urgently, just enough to remind me that it remembers me. It speaks without words. It reminds me how quiet it was inside, how heavy the world feels by comparison, how easy it would be to stop choosing, stop remembering, stop being pulled forward by time. I understand now why some people never fight it. I understand why the forest does not chase. It waits. And every evening, as the sun slips away and the trees grow dark, I feel the pull, gentle, familiar, patient. One day, I may not resist it. One day, when the forest calls my name after sunset, I may finally answer. And when I do, there will be no one left to tell this story. If you ever find yourself walking near a forest at dusk, and you hear your name called from the trees, remember this story. Do not answer. Do not follow. And do not trust the path that feels familiar. Because some places do not want to hurt you. They only want you to stay. And once the sun is gone, the forest is listening.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.